Welcome to Clued in Mystery. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Brooke, and we both love mystery.
Hi, Brooke.
Hi, Sarah. I have been waiting for this day for so long.
Yes, me too. It's very exciting for mystery fans, especially fans of Ruth Ware and her mystery thriller, The Woman in Cabin 10, which longtime listeners will remember hearing us do our deep dive. It was the very first What Would You Do book that we did. And today it's being released as an adaptation on Netflix.
Yes, today is the day. We've been talking about this because we heard that this was in the works probably about a year ago, and we've been like watching to see when it comes out and putting it on our Clued in Mystery calendar, and the day is finally here. So here's what Sarah and I are going to do. We are going to push pause on this recording, and we're going to sort of co-watch even though we're long distance from one another, and then we're going to come back and discuss what we thought of the film and how it compares with the book. Before we begin, Sarah, what are your expectations of this Netflix production?
Well, I don't know because I have not watched, I don't even think I watched a trailer for this. I've really tried to avoid it, but I do know that Keira Knightley plays Lo, our main character, Lo Blacklock. And I did listen to our What Would You Do episode to remind me of what we said about it when we first talked about it a couple of years ago.
I did too. I re-listened to our episode, and it was a lot of fun to think back. That was clear back in 2023, I think, Sarah. And I will say that I have been trying to avert my eyes from trailers, but you know what a big Ruth Ware fan I am. And I was on Instagram and I saw Ruth Ware speaking, and I turned on the volume, and she was discussing some of her thoughts about the film. So I did hear her say that she thought that Keira Knightley was too beautiful for Lo. And I found that interesting. So there's just a little tidbit that we can think on as we're watching the show.
Interesting. I hope it'll be good. I enjoyed the book, and it's always fun to watch how it appears on screen.
Absolutely. I'm off to pop some popcorn and get the television fired up, and we will talk soon, Sarah.
Sounds good. Okay, Brooke, we've watched The Woman in Cabin 10, and I'm sure you have some thoughts.
I do. I do. Just general comment is I really enjoyed it. I thought that it was a great film. So let's get into it.
So, my first thought is it was rated R. I don't know if you noticed that when it started up. And it makes sense because there was a little bit of violence and a little bit of language, but I thought, "Oh, you know what? That's interesting because I never rate books in my head, right? I might think, "Oh, this is a bit dark,"
Hmm.
but I there's no kind of rating system for books. So, I wouldn't have rated the book itself as R.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. I love the opening music, and like the music is there something else that we don't get in a book, right? And it
Mhm.
adds so much more like ambiance and like mood. And I think that this movie did a really good job using sound effects and that kind of like music. But right off the bat, we have something that's different. And I will say there are many things about the film that are different from the book. And a big difference right from the beginning is Lo was so much more successful and put together of a character than she is in the book. And she has no live-in boyfriend.
No, that's right. So that's two big departures, right? In the book, she is working for a small publication, or maybe she's freelance, I don't remember, but she's really not where she wants to be in her career. Whereas in the film, she is one of the top journalists at The Guardian, which for any journalist is probably a dream.
Yes. So she's very put together. And maybe this kind of harkens back to what the little bit I heard from Ruth Ware about not only is Keira Knightley just a very elegant and beautiful woman in her own right, but they made the character be very, polished and put together, and that's different from the low
Mhm.
Blacklock that we read about in the book.
Yeah, because another departure, so you mentioned she doesn't have this boyfriend, so that character doesn't exist at all in this. And she is also not a heavy drinker, whereas in the book, that was a really key plot point and a reason for people to dismiss her was, well, you had a lot to drink last
Mhm.
night, or you've been drinking since you got on board. Are you sure that you really saw what you think you saw? And in this, we don't see that. That's not used as an excuse to gaslight her. I- It's just absent. And I actually don't I think that that's fine. I was okay with that change.
I was too. When the big night happened and she hadn't been drinking a lot of champagne, and really none of the guests really over imbibe, which happens in the book. Like, it's not just low, everyone is, the alcohol is flowing. But when that happens and she hasn't been drinking, I had this, "Oh, no. What's the excuse going to be for them to gaslight her or not believe her?" And, uh, in fact, it kind of works well because rather than at the beginning having her traumatic experience be the break into her apartment, it's this story that she covered where a woman was murdered, in a drowning episode,
Mhm.
and so
Mhm.
that then becomes the reason where it's like, "You know what? You've just been through this traumatic work experience," and I really liked that. I thought that worked nicely, and I also liked the water. We had the water imagery and that first traumatic thing that happens to her, she's on the water. Really nice.
I agree, Brooke. I think that that makes sense. I know I don't remember this from the book, but all of those reflective surfaces, which
Yes.
I thought was really interesting visually, it creates a bit of confusion for her, right? And that's also carried over towards the end of the film when they're in Norway. They're in a very sleek, still very reflective space.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also, which I don't know if this is architecturally feasible, but the spiral staircase, which is something we saw that in Murder at the End of the World. And in this film, I mean, I think that there are books with that in the title. There's something about that spiral staircase that's very mystery theme. And I liked that. You would see her going up and down.
Yeah, that's great. The guest list, I think, was also different than
Yes,
in the book because I felt like there were a few more people that she was familiar with on in the book versus on the cruise ship,
I
right? Because
agree.
the photographer and Ben were two different people.
Mhm. I was gonna ask you that because I couldn't I didn't remember Ben being the photographer.
No, I think he was another like print journalist. So they combined those two characters into one.
Another big difference, and I think this works too, is that Anne is the reason that Lo gets the invitation for this trip at all, and she wants Lo's input because there again, Lo's this very high profile, successful journalist who writes for The Guardian, so people know her. And Lo learns that Anne is planning to change her will. And I thought this was really clever and a great way to set up more of a motive, um, and some clues that Lo can follow.
Yeah, so I couldn't remember from the book whether that was part of the original story that Anne was changing her will.
I can't recall that either, and we'll get to it, but definitely in the book there was more of an actual relationship between Carrie, who is playing Anne, and Richard. But that's not the case in this book either, which I thought worked well.
Yeah, I think in the movie the character just has a lot more credibility than she does
Hmm.
in the book.
Right. However, I feel like she seems a little bit more unhinged, and maybe that was just in my imagination as a reader. I did not, but you know. she does seem very crazy. And if you put yourself in the shoes of one of the other passengers, you'd be like, this lady is ruining the trip. She's being a maniac. You know, I could understand why they were all gaslighting her because she seems like she's just off her rocker most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, like, they just wanna enjoy this trip, and they don't really get into it, but Richard's brother, who's a famous musician, he leaves. He's like, "Nah, I've had enough of this." And they don't really explore whether he's got some secret or what his reason for leaving is, and I don't remember in the book, so he was a character, I think, in the book?
I don't honestly remember the character, and I felt like it was something new when I saw him come in the movie, but, because he's kind of like this, like, old school rock star and,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
great character, and I will say that these are some really great characters in this.
He left, and there's kinda some suggestion that, well, they should just make Lo leave, like, she's the one who's ruining the party, like, why are you letting her stay here?
Mhm.
Um, which is a good question, right? Because clearly it was possible to have someone leave.
Right, right. They had these little, commuter type boats that could take people in and out. So, I have this overwhelming urge because this is the book we started with to ask you a what would you do question, Sarah, and that is, would you have followed the hooded character that knocks on your door downstairs in the middle of the night?
Yeah, that is a good question, and I think, leading up to this, as you say, Lo has been behaving like a madwoman, right? She's trying to convince everybody that this someone has fallen off of the boat and that there was someone in this cabin, and she's just looking more and more bonkers. So I think I would, because she's feeling that judgment of the other passengers, and she believes in her heart that she is right. She wants to prove that to everybody else. So, and she's a journalist, right? So she's going to be curious. So I think if I were in the same situation, I probably would follow. I might at this point she's not trusting Ben either, right? She's kind of lost. She's not sure who she can trust, but I might do something to try and at least let someone else know what I was doing.
Yeah, yeah. I think that that's all spot on. But she does follow this person, and it's the hoodie that gives it away that, that was the girl that she saw in cabin 10 earlier. So she wants desperately to speak with her. And this is where we have a little departure again from the book's plot line. Carrie reveals that she's kind of an innocent victim of this whole thing
Mhm.
too. She thought she was going to be sort of an actress and impersonate the wife, do some paperwork, in and out. And in fact, Richard has some much bigger plans up his sleeve. And so I felt pretty sympathetic towards Carrie, which I never felt in the book.
I agree. She is a much more sympathetic character, almost more likable. Um, and doesn't she's seeking help from Lo,
Mhm.
which I didn't get from the book.
No. Yeah, and they don't have that adversarial, relationship at all, which they definitely go through that period of time in the
Mhm.
book.
So they arrive in Norway, Brooke, and everybody leaves. The crew has been told that she's resting. Nobody's really asked. I think because she was so disruptive, everybody's quite frankly happy that Lo has kept to her cabin. But Ben is a little bit like, well, I would like to see her before we go.
Yeah, that was a tough scene, and the way that they had set up that character relationship, it was really hard on Lo as well.
I know that there's a sequel book, Sweet 11, that we are going to do as our What Would You Do book. But this makes me think that maybe there's not going to be a sequel movie.
That's where I came away with it too. And also the change of character in Carrie, because we know that Carrie does play a role in Sweet 11, and we'll get into that when we do our breakdown of it. But those changes, and I will admit, before watching the movie, my assumption was, hey, 11 just came out, and Netflix is probably going to snatch that up and run with it. I suppose it's still an option because just like they made some pretty big plot shifts in this movie, it, there's a possibility that they do the same. But yeah, it didn't pan out the way I expected.
They didn't leave it with a suggestion that there would be a sequel, but I think you're right, Brooke. There's a lot of creative license that can be taken. They can certainly come up with a reason to to do Sweet 11, and if this film is successful, then that may be something that they end up doing.
Yeah, and that's a great point. We know that streaming services many times don't make any decisions on follow-ups until, the popularity and viewing is determined.
Well, I was surprised by Guy Pearce and Hannah Waddingham being in the film because as I said, I hadn't watched any of the trailers, so that was, you know, when each of those characters appeared, I was like, oh, who else are we going to see?
Exactly. Yes, I felt the same way. I thought that the casting was really great, and just some obviously some really big names. So that is fantastic for the genre.
One plot point that I don't remember from the book at all, and it, after watching the whole film, I kind of wonder why this was included. And maybe this is just the way it is on yachts. I don't know. But when she boarded and they made her take off her shoes, I've never been on a yacht. So, maybe this is something that is a common practice. But it just seemed a really strange thing to have because there was no reference to that again.
Absolutely. No, it was definitely not in the book. And when it did happen, I thought, oh, we're going to see this. This is going to come up like somebody's shoes are going to be really. But then she wore her shoes the rest of the time.
Well, I think they gave her some shoes,
But a lot of
right?
shoe choices. Like some of them she lost in the water.
That's right. Yeah, when she was on the railing, she lost a shoe, and I was thinking, "Oh, okay, well this is where this is going to come up because she's going to have to explain how one of her shoes is now lost." But no, there was no, so I don't know if it was a scene that was scrapped or what. Yeah, it just seemed like a really strange thing to show.
I agree. I think that the original scene of them removing their shoes should have been scrapped. So, what did you think about the scene where somebody pushes low into the swimming pool and then the cover closes over her, trapping her?
Yeah. I thought that that was a good scene, and I think that was in the book, wasn't it?
I don't think so. I need to go back and look because I felt like that was an added in scene. I don't recall that from the book, but something about it felt a little bit over the top to me. Like the timing was just like so perfect. And then luckily they have like a clear view down below deck of the pool so that the other passengers saw her struggling. I don't know. It went a little bit over the top for me.
I did wonder why that wasn't the first place that she went, to bang on that window because she kinda struggles to try and to open up the cover, but, that's so interesting that I have this memory of it being in the book and you're not sure that it's in there.
It was a great example of that moment in a mystery investigation where the villain kind of starts to act back. They try to shut down the sleuth, and that was a really great moment of that. Even if I didn't love the way that it was captured.
But there's not really any follow-up to it because Lo says to Carrie, "Why did you push me into the pool?" And Carrie says, "I didn't do that."
Hmm.
And we never find out who actually did.
Yeah, I guess in my mind, I assumed it was the doctor because Richard kind of has the medical doctor doing his dirty work. But you're right, we never find out. It's not followed up on. One thing I was thinking about when we were watching Sarah is that as somebody who writes these stories, and you and I have written mysteries together and tend to keep doing so, a lot of times we really worry over certain parts of the story. Should the main character have a boyfriend? Should they not? What's the going to be the clue? And this comparison between Women in Cabin 10 book and movie shows that really it doesn't matter. I should say it doesn't matter, but either one can work, right? And because I feel like both these are equally as good, but they're very different in
Mhm.
you kind of get from point A to point B.
I think that's such a good observation, Brooke. And I think really what you're saying is that as writers, you just need to make a choice and go with it, right? And follow the story. And
Yes.
it's not a cigarette or mascara. It's a clue. And where does that clue take you?
Mhm. Absolutely. There's a saying that says, make a decision and then make the decision right. Like, don't worry about if it's a right or wrong decision. Make a decision and make it right. And I think this is a illustration of that for writers.
So, Brooke, would you recommend someone watch this even if they haven't read the book?
Absolutely. And, part of me was thinking how much fun it would be to see it without sitting there going, oh, but in the book, blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
Uh, But many times I'm feeling frustrated when I have those feelings like, oh, but in the book was better, that kind of an attitude. And even though things were different, I still really liked this. I thought everything they did worked really well.
I agree. This is, I would say, one of the better screen adaptations that I've seen in that they stuck to the main points of the story, made some changes where it made sense. And I don't know that I would say it's better than the book, but I would say it's definitely worth a watch.
Absolutely.
Brooke, this has been so fun to watch this and debrief it, knowing that we used this book as a What Would You Do episode a while ago.
It's been so great, Sarah. It's kind of a history making book for us on our podcast, and now we're getting another opportunity to take the story apart. It was really fun, and we hope that you enjoyed it too, listeners. And if you watch The Woman in Cabin 10 on Netflix, make sure you reach out and let us know what you thought of it. Join our newsletter, and you'll find out lots more of things like this about our opinions on books and movies. But until next time, thank you for joining us on Clued in Mystery. I'm Brooke.
And I'm Sarah, and we both love mystery. Clued in Mystery is written and produced by Brooke Peterson and Sarah M. Stephen. Music is by Shane Ivers. If you liked what you heard, please consider telling a friend, leaving a review, or subscribing with your favorite podcast listening app. Visit our website to sign up for our newsletter, The Clued In Chronicle, and get mystery news, podcast updates, and bonus episodes. We're on social media at Clued In Mystery.